Hello. So this next lesson today is more factoring, but this time we're going to do factoring where your A is greater than 1, like this example. Just as a refresher, what we did last time was something like this. We factored something like this and we thought of numbers that multiply to 21 and add to 10, right? And then so this one would be 7 and 3, and then you write your two binomials like this. So in all of those examples, your leading coefficient is what it's called. The number in the front, your A, was always 1. And so now we're going to learn how to do this when your leading coefficient is something that's bigger than 1. So it's not 1. It's like 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. And so it's a different process. So you don't do this when A is bigger than 1. And so there's actually several different ways you can factor something like this. There's a guess and check method, and then I'm going to show you two different methods today. One I call using grouping, and one I call using a box method. They do have some similarities, but I'm going to let you choose which one you think you want to use. So the number one thing, and also too, like as I go through these examples, all of the steps are written out here. So I will give you a copy of these notes when I see you tomorrow, but make sure that everyone already has a copy of these notes. This is in the packet. Okay, go back a second. This is in the packet that I gave you last week. Everyone should have a copy of this packet. So this is on the second page. Anyway, so if you're working on your own and you're stuck, just read the steps one at a time. Read them, and it'll tell you what to do. Anyway, the number one thing you always want to do first, especially if your leading coefficient, your A, is bigger than 1, is first look for a GCF. See if there's a GCF, because if there's a GCF, then sometimes that takes care of the fact that A is bigger than 1, and then you can go back and do this. So if you take a look here, these three terms, they don't have a GCF other than 1. 2 doesn't go into 7 or 15, so there's nothing that you can take out. So once you realize that there's no GCF, then you follow these steps. The first thing that you do is you multiply the first term and the last term, 2 and negative 15. And so that's going to give us negative 30. The next thing you do is you think of factors of negative 30 that would add to 7. So two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add to 7. Since we want them to multiply to a negative number, that means one has to be positive and one has to be negative. So if you don't know your factors, grab your factor chart. I printed a copy of it here. So look at your factors of 30. If we make one of these factors positive and one negative, which pair could add to, I already forgot what it was, 7? Not 1 and 30, not 2 and 15, but 3 and 10. If I make 3 negative and 10 positive, that would multiply to negative 30 and it would add to 7. So that's going to be our winning combo. So you come back here. I like to write the two numbers. So it's going to be, 10 and negative 3. And so once you figure out the two numbers, the next thing that you do is you rewrite the trinomial with the middle term split into two factors. And so basically we're going to take 7x and we're going to split it into 10x minus 3x. By split it, I mean rewrite it in an equivalent form, because 10x minus 3x is 7x. And I remember I got the 10 and the 3 because I figured I multiplied the first and the last. I found 10 and negative 3 multiply to negative 30 and add to 7. So then you rewrite everything else. The 2x squared goes in the front and the minus 15. So do we see what I did? I took the original trinomial and I rewrote it with 4 terms. The first term stayed the same. The last term stayed the same. Just 7x switched to 10x minus 3x. And so the reason why we do this is we use a method of factoring called factor by grouping. And so how factor by grouping works is once you have 4 terms, you group the first 2 and the last 2. By group, I mean put parentheses around them. If there's a negative here, if there's a minus, you always want to include that negative in here, and I'll show you what happens there. Once you group the first 2 and the last 2, now you factor out the GCF of each individual set of parentheses. So 2x squared plus 10x, the GCF would be 2x. 2x times x gives us 2x squared. 2x times 5 gives us 10x. Now, when I do this second GCF, whatever is in the parentheses for the second grouping should match this. It should end up being x plus 5. If it doesn't, you know you did something wrong. So the thing here is, see how this leading coefficient in here is negative? Anytime you're factoring by GCF and your first term is negative, you have to take out a negative GCF. So the GCF here is 3, but I'm going to take out a negative 3, which really will just change both of these signs. So this is going to be x plus 5, because negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Notice that inside the parentheses, it's the same exact binomials with the same signs and everything. That's supposed to happen. So now that we've done that, to write our final answer, remember our final answer is still 2 binomials. The repeated one is 1 binomial. You only write it once though. And then the GCFs that we took out, those become the other binomial. We put them together, 2x minus 3. So these two came here. This repeated one came here. And then this would be your final answer. It's pretty cool how this works. Hopefully you think so too. I think so. Anyway, if you wanted to double check your answer, you could FOIL, double distribute, multiply this out, and you would get back to the original. So that's method 1, using grouping. The next one I'm going to show you using box method. There's actually multiple box methods. This is one of the box methods that we could do. I'm not going to show you the other one. The other one is more guess and check, and I feel like it's easier to have a straight method of how to do something. So the first step of box method is actually the same as with grouping. You first want to factor out a GCF if there is one. We have 3, 4, and 4, so no GCF here. So go on to the next one. The next step is, again, multiply the first and the last terms and think of factors of that product that add to the middle term. So I'm going to multiply 3 and negative 4 is negative 12. And now we want numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 4. So factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So it's going to be 2 and 6, but we need to figure out which one's going to be positive and which one's going to be negative. Remember, the higher number always matches the sign of the middle term. So it's going to be 2 and negative 6. Okay, now here's where it starts to get different from the first method. So the next thing you do is you draw a 2 by 2 box. If any of you had Miss Malino for Algebra 1, she did a box method similar to this, but it's more guess and check. So my box method, or it's not mine, I didn't come up with it, but the box method that I teach, what you do in the top left corner, and it says this all in here. The first term goes in the top left. C goes in the bottom right. So top left is 3x squared. Bottom right is your C, which is negative 4. So see, this goes in the top left. This goes in the bottom right. Now, this 2 and negative 6, if we were doing grouping up here, we would have split and wrote 2x minus 6x. Now we take these and we put them here and here, just with an x. So it doesn't matter where you put them. I can put 2x here and negative 6x here, or vice versa. So I'm going to put 2x here and negative 6x here. Okay. The next thing you do is on the top of each column, so here and here, here and here, and then on the left of each row, here and here, you identify, not take out, identify the GCF of each column and each row. So the GCF of 3x squared and negative 6x would be, they have a 3 in common. They also have an x in common. The GCF of 2x and negative 4 would be 2. 2 goes into 2x, 2 goes into negative 4. So that takes care of the top. Then we do this side. This row, 3x squared and 2x, they just have an x in common. No number other than 1. And then negative 6x and negative 4, since the one closest to the edge is negative, it's a negative GCF. So 2 goes into both of these, but since this one was negative, I put a negative GCF. Notice for these two, I didn't put a negative GCF because this one was negative, not the 2x. You care about the sign of these, the ones closest to the edges that you're writing the answers. So once you identify the GCF of each row and each column, the numbers, the GCFs that you took, those become your binomials. And so here are my two binomials. Ready? I have x minus 2 is one of them, and then 3x plus 2 is the other. And that's your answer. And if we did this in method 1, it would be the same exact thing. When I see you in class, you'll see. I'll have some of you do one method and some of you do the other. You'll get the same thing. So those are the two methods. I'm going to do the next two, maybe with both methods, just so you can see. So here's number 3. Our first step is to look for a GCF. There is no GCF, so we're good. So I'm going to multiply 2 and negative 3 is negative 6. So now we want numbers that multiply to negative 6 and add to negative 5. Since we want to multiply to a negative and add to a negative, one has to be positive and one has to be negative. So this is actually going to be negative 6 and 1 would multiply to negative 6 and add to negative 5. So to do grouping, I'm going to rewrite it, replacing negative 5x with negative 6x plus 1x. So here we go. 2x squared minus 6x plus 1x minus 3. Then you group the first two and the last two. Take out the GCF. GCF here, they have a 2 in common and an x, so it's going to be 2x and then x minus 3. Here, the only GCF is 1, which you do have to take out in this case. The reason why you have to take out the 1 is because if you didn't, this 2x wouldn't have a number to go with it for the answer. Notice how these repeat. That's what you want. So for your final answer, it's x minus 3, the repeated 1, and then the GCFs become 1, 2x plus 1. And that's your answer. I'm going to do this same problem using the box method over here. So remember the first term, 2x squared goes in the top left. The last term, c, goes in the bottom right. Don't forget the sign. You have to include the sign. And then remember your first step is to multiply the first and the last. Think about two numbers that multiply to that and add to that, which we already did for grouping. So they do have the same first steps. So it's negative 6 and 1. So I have to put negative 6x and 1x. Doesn't matter where you put them. They just have to be in these diagonal ones. Now on each column and each row, you're going to identify the GCF. So the GCF of 2x squared and 1x is x. The GCF of negative 6x and negative 3, since this one up top is negative, we have to identify a negative GCF. GCF of 2x squared and 6x is 2x. GCF of 1x and negative 3 is 1. This becomes one binomial, x minus 3. See how I have that right here? This becomes another binomial, 2x plus 1, right here. So see how we would have gotten the same answer? Either way works. I think kids tend to find this one a little easier, but I'm going to let you guys choose what you want to do. So that's example 3. And then the last one, example 4. First things first, look for a GCF. We have 3, 12, and 36. Ooh, wait a minute. Doesn't 3 go into all of those? It does. So sometimes if your A is bigger than 1, there's actually a GCF that you can take out. Watch what happens when we take out the GCF. So when we take out a 3, 3 times what gives me 3x squared? X squared. 3 times what gives me 4x? I just said it. 3 times what gives me 12x? 4x. And then 3 times what gives me negative 36? 12. Negative 12. Once you take the GCF out, you have to try to keep going. Do you guys notice how now this is like a trinomial like we did in the last part of the section where A is 1? So with that, the GCF stays in the front. And we're thinking of numbers now that multiply to negative 12 and add to 4. So multiply to negative 12 and add to 4. This was actually in one of the other examples, but it's going to be 6 and negative 2. So see how I was able to identify the GCF, take it out, and then factor in the other easier method. If I didn't notice that, that I could take out a GCF, I could have just done this in the regular way, but I would have had, like, that we just learned. But then 3 times 36 is a pretty high number. And so I wouldn't ask you to do one with numbers that high. So this would be your answer there. Okay, so that's that. I know that this is kind of tricky. So it's super important that if you're stuck today, that you please let me know. Email me. We can set up a time to meet. All right, that's it. Thank you guys. Have